These are 8 classic Mercedes-Benz models you can buy right now without taking out a second mortgage. Cars that once were the pinnacle of German engineering, built to standards that modern manufacturers can only dream about. And they're sitting in driveways across North America for the price of a used Camry. Mercedes-Benz has always carried a certain reputation. Back in the 1970s, their advertising slogan was, "Engineered like no other car in the world." And here's the thing, it was a claim that actually meant what it said. These weren't hollow marketing words, the cars backed it up. Engines that ran for hundreds of thousands of miles. Gearboxes that simply refused to quit, and paint so thick you could practically see your reflection from across the parking lot. Decades later, a surprising number of these over-engineered machines are available for shockingly affordable prices. We're talking collector cars starting under $5,000 on the low end, and each one offers an experience that's genuinely impossible to replicate in a new car. That weighted thump of the door closing, the tight and precise steering, the smell of old leather and wood trim that's been baking in the sun for 30 years. Small things that make a big difference, if you ask me. Before we get into the list, there's one golden rule you need to tattoo on your brain. I'm going to quote Mercedes source directly here. There is nothing more expensive than a cheap Mercedes. The purchase price is just your entry ticket. What matters is condition. Always buy on condition rather than specification, because rebuilds on these cars are brutally expensive. Rust repair alone can eat through your savings faster than a V8 eats through premium unleaded. With that said, let's start with the one they call the tank. The Mercedes W123, built from 1977 to 1985. If there is one car that defines what Mercedes-Benz means to most people, it is this one, the archetypal Mercedes. The car that taxi drivers in Beirut and doctors in Bavaria both trusted with their lives. The production numbers tell the whole story. Over 2.7 million W123s rolled off the line across a 9-year run. Of those, 2.37 million were sedans. Just under 200,000 were estates, and fewer than 100,000 were coupes. The rest were limousines and chassis built for ambulances. Because when you are rushing someone to a hospital, you want something that will not break down on the way. So what does one cost today? The average price for a W123 sedan sits around $11,934. Project cars that need some love can be found for as little as $1,000 to $2,000. Good presentable examples land between $5,000 and $8,000. Concours level cars, the ones that look like they just left the showroom, top out around $15,000. 2 key pieces of advice if you are shopping. First, go for a post-1980 facelifted car. You will recognize them by the rectangular headlamps. Those later cars got more efficient engines and much better rust-proofing. Second, know that the coupe is the most desirable variant on the classic market. It was far costlier than the sedan when new, and that premium has carried over. The estates are climbing too, especially the 6-cylinder models. Next up, the Mercedes W124. Built from 1985 to 1995, and many call this one the last great Mercedes. That nickname ruffles feathers, and honestly, the debate is interesting. Some argue the W124 had lost that special something that older Mercedes models possessed, sharing a lot of components with the smaller 190E. But whether you agree with that take or not, the W124 remains an exceptional car. The lineup was enormous. Basic 200E models with MB-Tex trim and manual windows on one end, and the legendary 500E performance sedan on the other, a car that Porsche actually helped build on its production line. Estates, sedans, coupes, and cabriolets were all on offer, so whatever your needs, there's a W124 to suit them. The average price sits around $27,426, but don't let that number scare you. It's pulled upward by the desirable 500e and the cabriolets. Standard sedans in running order can be found from around $2,000 to $3,000, and doubling that budget puts you into smart 6-cylinder examples that'll serve beautifully as daily drivers. For everyday use, the best options are the larger 4-cylinder engines, either the 230e or the E220, depending on age and preference. The 230e in particular offers the kind of straightforward Mercedes reliability that's genuinely hard to beat. A mild facelift in 1989 introduced revised plastic side cladding, and a more significant update in 1992 brought a redesigned grille, hood, and bumpers. If you're after the cleanest look, those late pre-facelift cars from 1988 to 1989 have a certain purity to them that's hard to resist. Now we're on to the Mercedes 190e, chassis code W201, built from 1982 to 1993. They called it the Baby Benz. This was Mercedes' first compact executive car, smaller and more affordable than everything else in the lineup, and the predecessor to what eventually became the C-Class. Over 1.8 million were built before production ended. Here's something most people don't know, though. Mercedes used the W201 as a testing ground for multi-link rear suspension, technology that later became standard across their entire range and then across the industry. So when you're driving a 190e, you're driving a piece of automotive engineering history. The average market value for a standard 190e sits around $10,074, with prices ranging from $4,390 for a 1985 model up to $21,000 for rare variants. Tidy examples typically span $4,000 to $10,000, while well-preserved low-mileage cars command north of $12,000. At the performance end, things get wild. The 190e 2.316 valve and the 2.516 valve, developed with British engineering firm Cosworth, were built specifically to take on BMW's M3 in touring car racing. The 2.316 valve has been climbing since the start of 2024, but you can still find a good one for around $26,100. And then there are the Evolution models, which exist in a completely different stratosphere. The Evolution 1 averages $125,963. The Evolution 2 averages $280,241. A Niki Lauda piloted 190e 2.316 valve sold at auction in 2023 for $344,102. So yeah, different conversation entirely. Next up, the R107SL, produced from 1971 all the way to 1989, carries the nickname the People's Sports Car. 18 years. This car was in production for 18 consecutive years, making it the longest-lived Mercedes ever built. It replaced the iconic Pagoda SL in 1971, and by the time production finally ceased in 1989, it held classic status even as a brand new car sitting on the dealer lot. From the beginning, this was a car designed with the American consumer in mind, and as a measure of its success, Mercedes kept building it with no major styling changes for almost 2 decades. In an era when American automakers were making year-to-year alterations just to keep things fresh, that was practically unheard of. A total of 237,287 were built, and the impressive quality has ensured that a large proportion survived. The average sale price across all variants sits around $24,000. Early examples in excellent condition sell for about $29,600, while collectors tend to covet the more powerful 1986 to 1989 variants, which push up to $51,200 for excellent examples. For American buyers, the 560 SL is the sweet spot. It offers the most refined mechanical package, the best performance of any U.S. market R107, and values that are climbing but haven't yet reached the stratosphere. A clean, well-documented 560 SL for $30,000 to $45,000 is one of the best propositions in the classic car market today, and all Mercedes SLS in the Hagerty Price Guide have appreciated an average of 15% over the past 5 years. There's also a hidden gem most people overlook. The R107 had a sister, the C107 SLC, a fixed-roof coupe built on a wheelbase stretched by 14.2 inches. Produced from 1971 to 1981, about 63,000 were built, and today SLC prices remain significantly lower than their SL counterparts. If you want R107 DNA without the R107 price tag, that's your car. Next up, the R129 SL, built from 1989 to 2002, earned the title the Modern Classic Roadster. It replaced the beloved R107 and had enormous shoes to fill, and it did so with technology that was genuinely groundbreaking. This was the first car in history to offer an automatically deploying roll bar, a system that pops up in milliseconds if sensors detect an imminent rollover. In 1989, that was science fiction. Engines ranged from a V6 all the way up to a glorious V12. And here's a fun detail about that V12. The 600 SL's engine was initially designed with an output closer to 400 horsepower. Mercedes deliberately detuned it to avoid overshadowing other models in the lineup. Even handicapped, it was absolutely magnificent. On pricing, the average across all R129 variants is $21,565. A 300 SL averages $12,421. The 500 SL sits at $16,496. The later SL 500 comes in at $19,163, and the V12 SL 600 averages $32,757. But the real bargain alert is this. Data from Hagerty shows the value of a 2002 SL 600 has actually decreased slightly over the past 12 months. One in good condition is worth about $23,200, roughly what you'd pay for a new Toyota Corolla. A hand-built 12-cylinder Mercedes-Benz Roadster for Corolla money. Which one would you pick? Next on the list is the W126 S-Class sedan, produced from 1980 to 1991, is widely known as the best S-Class ever made. And that's not hyperbole. Among classic S-Class models, the W126 is broadly considered one of the highest quality and most reliable vehicles ever manufactured, not just by Mercedes-Benz, but by anyone, period. The variant list reads like a phone book. 260 SE, 280S, 280 SE, 280 SEL, 380 SE, 380 SEL, 500 SE, 500 SEL, 300 SE, 300 SEL, 420 SE, 420 SEL, 560 SEL, and several diesel models, plus the ultra-rare 560 SEL, 6.0 AMG for those with extremely deep pockets. For everyone else, the average price is $16,333. Worn examples start around $4,000, though significant repair bills will follow at that price. The sweet spot is $8,000 to $17,000 for nice, well-maintained cars. Low mileage and rare versions push into the $20,000 to $30,000 range. And for perspective on how high the ceiling can go, the highest recorded W126 sedan sale was $292,500, for a 1989 560 SEL. The C126 SEC Coupe, built from 1982 to 1991, might be the most elegant shape Mercedes has ever produced. That pillarless design, where you can drop every window and open up a completely unobstructed greenhouse, is something modern safety regulations have essentially eliminated. They don't build them like this anymore because they literally can't. The first models were the 380 SEC and 500 SEC, with the range topping 560 SEC arriving for 1986. This is the priciest car on the list, with an overall average of $43,016. But dig into the variants and the picture shifts. The 380 SEC averages $17,423, making it the most affordable entry point. The 500 SEC sits at $22,221, and the 560 SEC, the most desirable of the three, averages $34,473. Few decent C126s sell for less than $15,000, and for a nice low mileage example, expect to pay roughly double that. At the extreme top end, a 1987 560 SEC AMG 6.0 wide body sold for $720,000 in December 2022. But that's a different conversation entirely. Finally, the W460 G-Wagon, produced from 1979 to 1991, the original off-roader. The G-Class is one of the most successful models in Mercedes-Benz history, and that boxy, utilitarian design has remained fundamentally unchanged since its debut, over 45 years of the same basic shape. But the original W460 is a very different animal from the luxury-laden G-Wagons you see cruising Rodeo Drive today. These first-generation cars came in short and long wheelbase configurations, with the short wheelbase even offering a convertible option. Gasoline variants included the 200GE, 230G, 230GE, and 280GE. Diesels covered the 240GD, 250GD, and 300GD. For the purist, the W460 represents the G-Wagon in its most honest, uncompromising form. The average 300GD comes in around $32,294, with the 230GE averaging $38,298. The market has matured significantly, but deals can still be found. The lowest recorded sale was just $2,500 for a 1983 300GD in August 2024. Projects can be had cheaply, while sorted, ready-to-drive examples command a real premium. Now, before you rush out and buy any of these, let's talk about what to watch for, because condition is everything on a classic Mercedes. Rust is the number one killer. The most problematic years are the late 1970s and the early 1980s, when the steel wasn't treated properly. Check above the headlamps, the hood, the trunk lid, rear arches, bottoms of the doors, sills, the lower half of the body, and the floors. Rust behind the license plate and trunk area is incredibly common. One legendary million-mile 240D was still running strong, but the floor had rusted out so badly you could see the pavement from the driver's seat. Mechanically, watch for worn engine mounts. Mercedes uses oil-filled mounts that start failing around 100,000 miles. Ball joints, sway bar links, and control arm bushings wear out sooner than you'd expect, and the cost of genuine parts has risen sharply in recent years. But here's the beautiful thing about these cars. The engines and gearboxes from the 1980s and the 1990s were built to survive the apocalypse, so mechanics are rarely the issue. Find one with solid bodywork and a documented service history, and you've got yourself a car that could genuinely outlast everything else on the road today. 8 cars, 8 different ways to own a piece of Stuttgart's golden age, and every single one of them proves that sometimes the best car you can buy isn't a new one. It's an old Mercedes that was simply built to last forever.